All right, let's do this. Hello and welcome. I am Lindsay Vastola, and I'd like to welcome you to 4 Tactics of Training Stroke Survivors with our speaker, Tracy Markley. I am thrilled to be able to introduce her. She is an industry veteran. If you have not heard her speak or read any of her things that she's written, she is absolutely an industry leader and voice. And we will walk away with she has this ability to take things that are very complex and make them so easy to digest. So as a fitness professional, I appreciate that. And the applicable, just easy things, tangible, I can take into my profession. So, she's been recognized around the industry as a 2020 IDEA Personal Trainer of the Year finalist. She's in the National Fitness Hall of Fame. You're an owner, right, of a studio. I mean, she's done everything. So there's no better person to be speaking about this. So I welcome you, Tracy. I'm here to moderate and help with the experience. So if you have questions, post them in the chat. And Tracy, I guess if we have time at the end, we can do some Q&A. We have about an hour together today. So with that, Tracy, I am going to make you host, and we'll hope that this gives us technical freedom for you to move forward. We'll make it work. Everybody enjoy. Thanks again, Tracy.
Thank you. And did it go? My errors didn't show up again.
Hover over the bottom left. Sometimes that'll...
They did. Oh, now they pop up. Hey, hello everybody. Sorry for the technical issues. I am Tracy, and thank you so much for that nice intro. If any of you guys have read my books or heard me before, I usually take a lot of knowledge and shove it into whatever time we have. So hopefully you guys, you got your handouts. I sent them over yesterday. If somehow you don't have them, I'm sure they can get them for you after. It will cover everything I'm talking about. So we're going to start. I'm bringing to you the 4 tactics of training a stroke survivor. And there's a lot of complex, just a lot of details in training the whole body and stroke survivors. But today we're going to talk about four things that I find is very essential. One is communicating with a stroke survivor. The communication between a stroke survivor and a fitness professional is essential. And there's many ways that communication sets in, and I will share that when we get to that part. And second, we're going to go over having knowledge of muscles and fascia and what movements each muscle participates in, and the fascia participation is a must. And I'm going to share things about the shoulders today to kind of give an example of how that works together. And understanding that the brain heals in its own order. The order can be scattered and it does not always follow the way we have planned the workout planned, because each brain recovers differently. And then the fourth one is basically, as we understand the body and we understand the brain heals in its own way, we have to adapt. So we need to understand that exercises and therapy must be adapted based on the survivor's progress and the neuroplasticity happening in their brain, because each survivor is different. So let's jump right into the communicating between a fitness professional and a stroke survivor is essential. Stroke survivors need to know they're being heard. They want to know they're being understood. They want to be treated with respect. They don't want to be treated like they're irrelevant. So the communication of just your character and your personality as you interact with them, bring to them love and caring and kind eyes. Don't ever be like, oh, they're irritating you, they're taking so long to answer a question, or they can't process a word quick enough, because sometimes in the middle of them trying to communicate back, they may be talking completely fine, and mid-sentence, they just forget a word they want to say. We kind of all do that these days, but stroke survivors literally just forget what word, they literally cannot come up with a word. So just be patient with them and ask questions and then listen, and try to let them answer their questions from their feedback of their body and not us feeding them the answers by our perception, if that makes sense. It is very important at the beginning of every session with them to communicate, get with them, how are they feeling today? Are they fatigued? Are they tired? Have they ate well? Have they slept? Are they energetic that day? Are they fatigued? How are we starting off? And another thing, and this, you're going to hear this all throughout the presentation today, has there been any changes? And we're going to get into that a little later. Like if they come in and say, my foot's cramping up today, or my big toe's moving and it wasn't moving the last time I saw you, that's the communication you want to know, because we're only with them a limited time a day, limited time a week, and all these hours at home, they're going to have changes, and it will help us train them the best we can if we know their little changes and their big changes. Often due to brain injury from their stroke, it takes a survivor sometimes longer to process what we're saying. Like I was saying earlier, you may ask them a question and they may pause a little longer than people who has not had a stroke. They need to process what you asked before they answer. Just be patient with them. Never act like, they're irritating you. Be kind. They need that. They will forget a word mid-sentence. And they need to feel comfortable communicating with you. If they feel like they are safe to forget a word, they're safe to sometimes forget your name, and you're not going to give them a hard time, and you're just on their side no matter what they're going through, they're going to stick with their program for their own therapy and more stroke recovery with them, for them, but they're going to stick with you as their leader and as the person helping, because they feel comfortable and safe with you. And that all comes from all the dynamics of communication, your body language, how you work your eyes and how you smile and the time you give them. You don't walk away while they're still talking to you. Just, the overall proper communication, they really need it. I like to communicate muscles and illustrations with them. You'll again see that further in this session. I like to show them muscles. If I'm trying to show them core and posture and stability of their shoulders, I will pull out muscles of all the core, the transverse muscle, the diaphragm, the psoas. I will show them muscles, so I'm communicating them a visual to go in their thoughts and their knowledge to help them work with the exercises and how they all correlate together. That is so important. So the communication is a big dialogue here. They want to know why. Why are we doing an exercise? Often they just get, here, go home, do this exercise, twice a day, 10 reps each. Well, why are they doing it? If I show them muscles and say, if you do this, then you can help your body go to this next step, then you can do these exercises, and then this will help you lead to your goal, that will give them hope, and it will show them a purpose of what they're doing. If they're just aimlessly doing something, they don't have a goal. It doesn't give them hope. It's kind of like, what's happening, what's going on. And so the whys are very good for them to answer that. Why are we doing this? Why are we doing this exercise? I love to use cell phones as a communication tool. Cell phones are great for pictures and videos. Of course, the client has to be okay with that. And to be honest with you, some stroke survivors, they don't want to see themselves on film or pictures because they don't like how they look anymore. But if they're learning to walk or they're learning to move an arm, and sometimes the recovery steps are so small, but if you have a video of a month ago and you show them now that their arm's swinging further and they literally see it, they'll go, oh my God, I am making progress. Because sometimes they don't see it, but if they have a visual to see the other end of it where they made progress, it will help them. Plus also, if you're trying to show them an exercise and they're not getting where they're not doing it right, you can film what they're doing, film what you're doing, and make them see the difference. They'll go, oh, I get what you're saying. These are all great ways to communicate. Another way of communication is, and I learned this working with this great stroke survivor, just wasn't taught in school to me or any of the education I've learned, just from experience. Say like I want someone to lift their arm like a lateral raise. Well, the brain is just not communicating to the body, lift your arm like, up to the side. But if I say, reach out and pet the dog walking by you, his arm would do it. So I learned this because we're working on his arm. Then my therapy dog works with us. And my dog walked by him in the middle of exercising and his arm just reached right out to pet the dog. And so I started from that point on giving instructions to physical actions, like reach for the glass. Oh, reach your arm behind you to the wife behind you. And that started getting the brain, making the movement better. That made sense to the brain. That's what we're used to before strokes. We don't walk around going, lift your arm. I'm petting the dog and grabbing a dish. So all these dynamics, the communication is just so important, and they all work together. Now the next section, I'm going to put a lot of knowledge of muscles in there. Having knowledge of muscles and fascia and what movements each participates in is a must. And as you've heard me say, survivors are seeking out professionals desperately to help them bring their movements back. And I don't say desperately lightly. They truly are desperate. They want to drive. They want to eat with a fork again. They want to walk. They want to go back to their jobs. They want to hold their spouse's hand. They want to play with their grandkids. There's all these everyday life dynamics that we don't always pay attention to. They're missing that they want back. And the more muscles we understand and fascia and which muscles attach to which bone and help move which bone and which joint around, the better you can help them bring those movements back. And I tried, like I said before, I like to teach them that too. It helps them work with you because they're understanding what they're doing. And as you're meeting clients that are in different ranges, they come in wheelchairs, walkers, hemi-walkers, leg braces, arm braces, some with no really bad physical dynamics, but they need to strengthen and get some spasticity loosened up. You'll come across all different dynamics. If you understand the muscles in the movements, you can help them bring movement back. And as professionals, they're trusting us. They're trusting that we have the knowledge that they need to get their movements back. They trust we know muscles. They don't really understand that some personal trainers do a one-day course, some maybe do a 2-hour online course, some go to college. Some of them just assume every fitness professional have the same education. And as you know, that's not true. We all reach out for advanced stuff to keep learning. And so let them gain your trust by showing them the knowledge you have. That's how you're going to keep them as a client, and that's how you're going to help them move further in the recovery. So I'm going to go forward here, and we're going to talk about shoulder subluxation. So I'm not going to go through the whole body in this session, but in the course, I go through all kinds of things. But today, I'm just going to go over shoulder subluxation. Many stroke survivors have subluxation of the shoulder, and this is a partial dislocation. Most of them have constant pain in that area if they have the situation going on. Often you will find they hold their shoulders up high in their ears. They sometimes one shoulder's up, sometimes both, and we're always telling the clients to drop their shoulders. Sometimes this is habits. Sometimes this is spasticity, and one muscle has something to do with the shoulder joint, and there are many. Sometimes it's just a habit when they hold their cane to shove their shoulders up. Some have awareness of it, some don't. It's poor posture. It's all the dynamics in between. And we need to strengthen the core and the postural muscles to help fix the subluxation of the shoulder and to put the posture back up. I had a stroke survivor, and as we go through the process in the next couple minutes, it will make sense what I'm saying. I had a stroke survivor who's had 2 strokes in her 60s, maybe close to 70, always had her shoulders in her ear. And that would be right here. If you look at me, this lovely picture in the red shirt, the one that says no, they walk around their shoulders in the ear, where she had her shoulder always up. And I'm always saying, drop your shoulder, drop your shoulder. So they have to get in the habit to dropping their shoulder while they're in the car, while they're home, while they're sleeping, while they're watching TV. And after about 2 to 3 weeks working with her, her shoulder popped back in place. She said, I was sitting there and all of a sudden there's a big, loud clang in my shoulder. And then her shoulder felt better and her pain was away. So that's where we're coming into just the parts of the shoulders and subluxation. So now we're going to go back to giving you an example of why it's so important to know the muscles and show the muscles and to explain this to your client or maybe to their caregiver, depends on their dynamic, what they process. But if you know it, you can help them. So if you take the pictures I just showed you with me, with my shoulder in my ear, and you look right here at the scapula and the whole shoulder joint area, if this was way up here, it's going to throw everything out here. The shoulder, the ball and socket and the shoulder movement won't move freely. You can't get the movement back. It's going to, most likely, if this shoulder's way in the air, it's going to hike up this area and cause more instability in the pelvic, which can lead down to the walking and the knees and the ankles and so forth. If it makes sense to a client that the center of the body must be strong in many muscles to achieve a fuller recovery, such as stabilizing the pelvic, holding the body upright for balance and stabilization. If you look at the first picture, you can see the psoas, the quadratus lumborum not there, the multifidus, it's actually in a picture right here behind me, but you can't see it. You got the transverse abdominal in the other illustration here, and then you have all the other muscles aren't even here. All the center of the body, it has to be strong to hold the rib cage up, to hold the upper body up, the torso, and to put the shoulder blade and the rotator cuff muscles in proper alignment to hold that in the right posture, so then you can help prepare any shoulder injuries, or even people coming back from surgeries or any kind of injury in the shoulder. But it will help with subluxation, but also if they're trying to get arm movement back, the biceps flexing, elbow bending, wrist, fingers, hands, the whole dynamic, the posture has to be set for everything to work down the line. So as we go further down here, again, here's my shoulder, shoulders down, make them break that habit wherever they're at. If you see them walking in with their walker and they're shoving their shoulders in their neck, drop it down. They have to retrain that habit. And then this is my client, one of my clients here, he posed for this for me. See how this is often common with many people even people aren't stroke survivors. They lay on their back to do exercises, and this is how their neck ends up. They have their hyperextended neck, and you want to put something under their head. So while you're working with clients with anything to do with their upper body, neck, chest, and they're laying in this position, even if they're doing pelvic tilts like butt lifts and leg exercises, line up their spine. It's very important. I had to throw that in because that's very important, because this is how they build malfunction, build injuries, or never recover. Here is the rotator cuff muscles, and some of you guys may know these. You got the 4 rotator cuff muscles. When someone's trying to get movement back in their arms, the shoulder joints have to be back up in the upright position, good posture, which means strong core, strong center of the body, strong trunk to line the shoulder blades up. And then the rotator cuff muscles, they help hold it in place. But if somebody has spasticity, or the rhomboids are stuck, or if they have spasticity in the rhomboids, or maybe little in their serratus anterior, or some muscle who just surrounds and attaches to that shoulder blade, it's going to be harder for the shoulders to stay in place in the right position, plus it's going to be harder for movement in the arms to come back. Here is a couple samples I'm showing here. What I like people to do, and if there's somebody with you right now, take your hands, put them on their back, like put your hands on their shoulder blades. If you don't have anyone with you now, try it later, or try it with a client, or have a client put the hands on your shoulders, on your shoulder blades, your scapula. Do all these movements that the range of motion the shoulder joint goes through. You will feel the shoulder blades lift up, drop down, rotate in, rotate out. And so this is a sample of, if you have a stroke survivor trying to get arm movement back, if the shoulder blades, the scapula is stuck and not moving, these movements won't come back. You have to get those small muscles, the rhomboids. Where are they going to go over here? The rhomboids, they're not super small, but they're small in here. They attach, look at all the muscles that attach at the scapula. You have to get those moving and loosened up before you can get them lifting the arms, bending their arms, getting the movement of swinging the arm around and all the movements that the shoulders do through that shoulder joint. And so in the course, I go into this with more muscles, but like I said, I'm just going over this area today. For instance, you got the trapezius muscles, we call them the traps. They have 3 parts, and they adduct and adduct inward to rotate the scapula. That means the scapula moves, like when your hand was on someone's back doing those movements, and the trapezius muscles plays part of it. So the traps have a big role in getting someone's arm movement back. The rhomboids, they rotate inward and adduct the scapula. You got the levator scapula and the serratus anterior. A lot of people don't think much about that muscle, except for they're just trying to get sculpted there to see those nice cut lines. But they also attach. Watch for things attach. Know where the muscles attach and know what movements they make. We come back up here to the levator scapula. See how it's right here, levator scapula? If someone's shoulders are up in the ears, like that picture I showed you, all this is flexed or it's stuck in spasticity. Sometimes you don't know if it's a poor habit the client has or that's where part of their spasticity from the stroke kicked in. But getting the habit to drop the shoulder and retraining those muscles to release will help bring back movement in the arm. I hope this is making sense to you. There's a lot to it, but if you just think of the common sense, where does the muscle attach? What movements does it help it make? It can help you get the movements back. So if you notice real quick before we switch, you got the biceps and triceps in here. The biceps and triceps, one head of each of those muscles attach at the scapula. Right here, this is the tricep head, one of the triceps heads attaching at the scapula. So there's a lot of things involved, a lot of muscles and fascia involved with just things around the shoulder, the subluxation and movements of the ball and socket joint of the shoulder. And again, try this. If you try this, it will really help you make sense. And if you get the stroke survivor to put their hands on your shoulder blades and you move it around, they'll go, oh, and that will make them start doing the exercise they need to get the shoulder blades moving, which will help them. Again, here's just another quick picture of, here's just showing how the deep core muscles and the spine muscles help maintain the body posture. So the shoulders and the neck can line up for movement. And if you see how the nerves run, this isn't exact right here where the nerves are, but basically the nerves come down out of the lower neck vertebrae and they come down the arms. And this is where the brain is sending message to the spinal cord to send message for movements. If the shoulders are up in the air or they're rounded over in poor posture, it's going to inhibit the communication between the brain and the movement you're trying to make. And in my studies, I was taught that it's a scientific fact. If you're in poor posture, you're going to have more situations. And if you're aligned in proper posture, all the functions in the body work better. So here's just another quick few illustrations just to show all the muscles that in the spine that help hold it up. There's more of them right there. And on the right side, if the pelvic's crooked or imbalanced because of poor posture or spasticity, it's going to throw out the whole side of the body. The hamstrings will be shorter and tight on one side, the hips, the psoas, everything. And here's just another quick, here's a pelvic stable. Here's a stable pelvic, and here's hamstrings. And if you move forward, I show this slide a lot. Here is my 86-year-old stroke survivor sitting in his wheelchair, and this is how his pelvic's sitting, which means all those muscles we just showed are uneven. And he goes to stand up with his pelvic in that position. He's not going to be able to stand up. He's going to always be unstable. But what I like to show here is most wheelchairs come with a really poor cushion, and you can see how he's all sunk in and leaned over to the side, and his pelvic looks like this as he's sitting. And when he tried to stand up, he couldn't get stable. But I got him to get a cushion off Amazon that's made like we put on our computer desk, more firmer, has little dips in there for the glutes to fit in, and a little opening in the back to make the sacrum and the tailbone, this area, more comfortable. Now he's sitting stable. Now his hip bones look like this when he's sitting. Hamstrings line up, and all the muscles in the previous pictures line up better. So when he goes to stand up, he will train his body to stand up stable. This is essential to know what's happening to the muscles in the body as they have poor posture and knowing which muscles are affecting it. And here's just another picture. I used this in my webinar a few weeks ago to show if the pelvic's uneven, because the center of the body is uneven and weak, it's going to throw the pelvic off, which means all these muscles on one side and all these muscles on one side, and how the sciatica nerve communicates to the leg for movement and is going to be dysfunctional. It won't develop functional and to the best strength and recovery they can get if the center of the body is weak. The center of the body being strong and upright in posture will help the limbs, the arms and legs, work better. So there's your anatomy session for this so far. We're going through this kind of fast. I hope this is making sense. Understanding the brain heals in its own order. The order can be scattered and does not always follow the workout plan. So if you go back to where I was talking about the core, you're working on the core to get it strong. You're working on their posture. Now, all of a sudden, their shoulders wants to work better. Yes, it's the brain connecting to it. You put the body in an upright position. Now it can make the movement better because now the ball and socket joint is lined up better. But there's also, I don't know if it's a diagnosis or title, what you call it, but it's called spontaneous recovery. And you may have 2 stroke survivors that had the exact same type of stroke, same dynamics. Maybe they both couldn't walk. Maybe the whole body is paralyzed the first week, and all of a sudden one's better and the other one's not. There is something called spontaneous recovery, and brains will just come back and heal when they're not doing anything to try to make it get better. As you're working with a client, you may have 2 clients that kind of seem like they're the same. You're doing basically the same thing with them in a sense, because that's kind of what happens. One will recover quicker, or maybe one person's foot drop will heal and you're not even working on it. That's part of the spontaneous recovery. That's part of where the brain, because the neuroplasticity of the brain is the healing of the brain, it just it does its own thing. We do our work, we do our exercises, we try to get the clients to eat right, drink their water, and do everything they can to help heal it. But the brain also just has this plan of its own that we don't have control of. So they may come to you to train, they come to you, they're here last week, you're working on their shoulders, and the next week they come in for a session and they're like, I don't know why, but I can, stand up and put my pants on, not fall over. We're not even working on that. And that's just their brain healing something that is on its own. So listen to the things they say, especially if say like you've been working on their leg a lot and their core, and all of a sudden they come in and they say, my fingers are moving. We're not even working on them or whatever. They don't even have to say that part, but they'll tell you their fingers are working, or they're almost able to hold a fork. That's their brain's way of telling the survivor and you helping them, let's work on the hand now. That's the brain trying to heal the hand. So change your focus or add in more things to do with the hand. Give them more things to do at home. I have people come to me that will say, for instance, here, one of the examples is I had a client. It was a client that he was 82. They traveled from New Jersey to come live in my small town for 30 days to train with me. It was very intriguing. Sad they had to do it. They had horrible helpers. So they found me through my books and came here. It was like just fascinating and sad too. But we worked together for 30 days, almost every day. He had a couple days off. And after the first week, she said his hand's twitching in his sleep and not a lot. And I always see that as the brain's trying to heal the hand. So we started working on his hand more. I started sending him home with more hand exercises because I see that as the brain trying to bring the hand back. And in my experience, that is the case. That may not be the case for everybody. I had this other client about 6 months ago, maybe a year. She's in Portland, Oregon, and she said that her hand's twitching a lot in her sleep, and she doesn't sleep well. I said, well, because most of the survivors' questions when that happen is this a bad thing? What's happening? And in my experience, it's trying to come back. Like I said, it may not be the truth for everybody, but what I've experienced, that's what it seems to be. So I said, well, are you really awake? Do you feel like you can get up and do your hand exercises safely when you're wide awake at night like that? She goes, yeah. So when she was up at night, not sleeping, and her hand was twitching, she got up and started working on her hand exercises at that moment. And a few months later, she's kayaking again. She was released and was able to be alone with her grandkids again. And she's a young grandmother. She's like 47 years old, but she wasn't able to be alone with her grandkids. She got that back. A couple weeks ago, she sent me a message and said, oh my God, I was playing with my grandkids. I was able to pull them in the wagon with my affected hand. So she's someone who works really hard too. They have to work hard and do things daily. So they're going to come in and tell you things like this. And you follow the pattern. If they come in and say, look what I can do, follow what they're saying, listening to them. This is part of the communication, a big part of the communication. Hear what they're saying and honor it. If they come in and say, I know this is how they usually approach it. I know it's not a big deal, but my pinky's moving. That's a big deal, because if you've learned the nerves, how they come down out of the neck and the spinal column, if it's getting to the pinky, that's hitting I think it's the big ulnar nerve. It's a big nerve. If that's being awakened, you want to go and work on the arm more. Hand exercises, good exercises, very important. And let's go back a little bit. We have a little more time. I got through that really quick. Let's go back to, since we're getting a lot more time here, if you go back to stabilizing the pelvic, and we talked about the core, we're into the core muscles, and we got the sciatica nerve. If you look at this diagram, and granted, just know my illustrations are like medically to the exact T, but they pretty much do what we need to see. Usually when we hear sciatic or sciatica, however people say it, sciatica pain from the sciatic nerve, they think it's a bad thing. But if you look at the sciatic nerve and how it branches off, that nerve needs to be healthy for movement and sensation throughout the leg. So if their pelvic and hips is crooked, like you see here, it's going to affect the sciatic nerve, which is between the fourth and fifth lumbar vertebrae, which is going to affect them trying to get the sensations and the communication to move their legs. If they're trying to get off the leg brace, the AFOs, some of them you may see them that have the leg brace on to help stabilize their leg and their ankle for safety, which that's a whole other ordeal. Not everybody needs them, but I teach about that later. If they're having issues with their posture and their muscles in their core to stabilize their spine, they're not going to get out of that AFO. It all starts with the center of the body. And in my studies, I was taught that the brain sends a message to the multifidus muscle first to tell the body, here's the multifidus muscle through here, little tiny muscles in through here. The brain sends a message to the multifidus muscle to stabilize the spine before it sends messages to the limbs to make movements. So if you're trying to help someone to get the arm movement back and their core is really weak and that multifidus muscle isn't being fired up to where the brain can go brain, multifidus, limbs, it's going to go brain, roadblock. If you're just trying to train the arm first, it's going to skip the pattern. Does that make sense? So getting the core strong isn't just for, obviously, core isn't just for, six-pack abs. Getting it strong isn't just for the posture to look good, it's for structure of the body and how the brain communicates with the muscles. So if you're trying to help fix shoulder movements, help them get that shoulder to drop out of the neck and the brain to communicate, work from the center of the body out. That's my main tactic. Center of the body, know your muscles. So is that making sense to you guys? I hope so. The multifidus muscle, the transverse muscle, and the pelvic floor, transverse muscle, and the diaphragm, along with multifidus muscle I just showed you, they are all on the same neuromuscular loop, which means they all have to be strong for all of them to function good. So, for instance, if the transverse in someone is very weak, the multifidus muscle cannot do its job on the body to its full potential unless the rest of these core muscles, those four muscles, are strong. So in order for the multifidus to communicate with helping get all the stabilizing muscles to stabilize the body before it moves the limbs for safety, you need to get the core in. This is like the root of fall prevention, of stability and walking. And that's for anybody. But to retrain that programming in the brain after brain injury is essential. It's essential. So we got about 20 minutes. I want to give you time for questions. Do you guys want to switch to questions now? I'll have you pop in. Usually I have more questions, a lot of questions when I do my things, so go through it quick. So I'll leave it up to you.
Questions, if you're joining in live, post some questions. There were some comments just about understanding the why, explaining it to clients, how important that is. But yeah, any other questions?
So the question was it like, how do you explain to them the why?
Oh, I think she was just reaffirming, because you were talking about how important it is, to talk about the why. And you talked to this a little bit, but how do you find is the most effective or the best, how do they receive that information best? Like just the methods as a coach, as a trainer, in describing, how do you find, you are able to communicate best with clients? Is it while you're training? Is it sit down, explain to them first and then do it? What are some of the best practices you've found there?
Kind of both. What I do when I do my initial training or initial meeting, you can see my muscles behind me. I have a notebook of muscles, or if they're with me, they're hung up on my thing. I will explain to what I told you guys. I will tell them, that I would explain to them how essential the core is. I will show them the transverse muscle and explain your transverse muscle is like a girdle. So imagine you're putting in a tight girdle and you're zipping it up, and they go, oh, I can feel that. And then when I'm working with them, I constantly say, zip up that girdle, zip up their girdle. It makes them go from here to here instantly. And so I use visuals. I use me showing visuals. I'm explaining to them, and I'll switch the pages and show the muscles. I'll go a little slower than I did with you guys, but I will go to the muscle. You see this muscle? This is the muscle that makes this movement, but you can't do this movement until you get this. And they'll usually make sense to them. You have a few that they don't want to hear it. Kind of like when we have the ones come for diet and exercise, they don't want to hear it. They don't want to hear it. They just want the easy way out. It's like, there's not an easy way out. You have to put the body back together like a puzzle piece. If you skip a section, it's going to limit this. So I go through my little spiel. I usually don't charge them for their consultation. I show the muscles, I show the movements. If I'm buying my equipment, I'll be my example showing them things. But as I'm with them, I may go, remember that muscle right there? That's what I do. I'm just constantly, there's usually more in my studio, there's muscles all over the place. So I'm always like, look at that, zip that up, do that. And they kind of follow. And after a while, they'll say, my God, I just hear your voice in my head all day long. But that's some great. Forget
that awareness. Yeah, that awareness, that consistency is so important. Joy says, I'm a MELT instructor and we work with hydrating the fascia for better neurological communication and body sense. How beneficial could this be for a stroke client?
Explain what it is again. What is it?
Joy, do you want to come on either audio and maybe audio or visual? Maybe just talk a bit more. So the MELT method, it's a fascia. Are you familiar with MELT? And Joy gives a better example of it, but it's focused on fascial work.
We do like really soft balls and foam rollers. It's just to stimulate hydration by rolling or pulling on connective tissue.
Oh, I know what you're talking about. Yeah. You know what? I think anything that encourages the movement of the fascia and just keeping that fascia and muscles hydrated, I say, yeah, try it, unless it hurts the person. Because that's one thing with stroke survivors, most of them are dehydrated. And a lot of this, I don't know if this is true. This is kind of like my thoughts of it. A lot of them have their strokes early in the morning. They didn't hydrate all night long. And they probably they're not drinking a lot of water either. So I don't know if that's playing into a stroke. But when I teach on the brain, and all the different things I teach is in the course too, teach on the brain. If the brain is dehydrated and the fascia and the muscles are dehydrated, it's going to make it harder for them to recover. So you figure if we're just running around slightly dehydrated, where sometimes we get kind of dizzy or we're kind of like, oh God, I'm so fatigued. If they're doing that on top of their brain injury, they have a double whammy and they're going to have a harder time functioning. So anything that encourages hydration is excellent. They need it. But they also, if they're doing that kind of work, they need massages and anything that works the fascia deep, they need to keep flushing the toxins out too, because that can make them kind of dizzy. Does that make sense?
Yeah, totally.
Okay.
That's great. Talk a little bit more if there's anything, and then you can continue. I don't want to, interrupt if there was anything more, but, that brought to light, are there things that sort of like the you don't know what you don't know, when you first started training stroke survivors, what are the things that you wish you knew early on, or that you find most fitness professionals don't know? Things like the hydration, like what are some of those things that stand out that might be helpful for those, especially early, maybe not having a ton of experience?
One thing I wish I knew early on was to take more filming of them. When I realized that they can get so much potential, I'm like, oh my God, I wish I would have filmed in the first 2 weeks here. I would have had so much more to show in teaching and show them. That I wish too. What I noticed, like when I was training, my first book is The Stroke of an Artist, is a man I trained who was an artist who had a stroke. He wanted his story shared. But where I'm at right now, I was working at a gym at the time. I'm in a small town and not everybody was certified. And he actually was looking around going, they don't know what they're doing. And I'm like, shh. So what he saw as the client, once he got knowledgeable, he was learning with me, he instantly could tell who didn't get big certifications or who don't know their muscles. So what I learned from that experience and listening to other, like that client, they flew 3,000 miles to be here because they couldn't find help where they lived. That blew my mind. That's what made me want to start doing the courses to teach this, because what I realized is a lot of fitness professionals are not learning their muscles. They learn the basics, but they don't learn the muscles. And it's a big deal. Even when I talk to some physical therapists, they'll say, oh, well, there's no physical therapist in our area that specializes in stroke. Well, that's just them not making decisions to go take a course on specializing in stroke. So they teach the basics, and the basics are very limited. You have to advance that. Like when I first started in the business, I went to college. I went to like a 2-year program, but it took me longer because I was working full time, going at night. And I thought, oh, I know my stuff. So I start my studio. I bought it from someone else part-time. I had someone come in with arthritis, fibromyalgia, lupus. I'm like, huh? We don't know this. I mean, when you get your certification, but they cover a paragraph or two of arthritis. So I found a company, this is back before year 2000, that did courses, nurse stroke courses. And I did one on arthritis, fibromyalgia, osteoporosis, and then I just kept going. So right before the core became a fad, I remember meeting a client. They're coming from physical therapy for back pain, doing stuff for the core. Like, well, why aren't we doing this so you don't get injured? So that made me take classes on that. So I just kept learning and learning. So it all kind of puts it together. So my biggest thing that I think is lacking is learning the muscles, learning where they attach, what they do. It's essential. And learning learning about water. The brain's like 90% water. And I learn as I go along. Like today, I'm like, I feel like I know things, but 2 years from now, I'm like, oh my God, I didn't even know anything back then. I just constantly learn. And I learn from my clients a lot too. Because, well, I'm taught, there's certain kind of strokes. Then I'll meet someone and they'll tell me they stroke they have. I'm like, I've never even heard of that kind of a stroke. I mean, there's so many things out there we don't know about. Like the client reaching for the dog, that story I shared. I would have never thought, reach for that dog and see if your arm works. But that taught me, oh, I can do this to help. So you learn by experience. And it seems like with me too, when I learn something, guaranteed, I'm going to meet someone in 2 months I have to share it with. It's just how it works. So if you're aware and open to it and trust your gut, you kind of keep learning, but you got to learn the muscles. You do.
That's a great point. Joy also asked, how do we find those, and I'm presuming she's talking about, how do you find clients who have experienced strokes, and let them know that, that you're available. So she says, yeah, how would we find those with strokes and let them know about us? And she said, through medical doctors, or how do you find these clients, patients?
I have found them because of my reputation in my books. They find me. But what I would do is reach out to stroke support groups. If you have knowledge or something to offer them, they love speakers. Tell them, this is what I do. Can I come, can I be a guest speaker? You don't usually get paid for it, but they might want you to come speak at a stroke support group in your town. I started the stroke support group in this town. We did a couple meetings, COVID hit, never did a meeting again. And they're just starting to back up now, but I'm moving soon, so I'm not going to be taking over it anymore. But reach out to the support groups. They're really open. I'm connected with some of the therapists in town, so that helps too. Once they kind of they know your work, or once someone in that profession sees you work with a client that did well, that opens their eyes to you. You show them something you did. Maybe write an article, maybe write something up to show them what you know and what you can do, and present it to them. It depends on what's around you. I'm in a place with a lot of seniors, and when I did my book signings, that will say I wrote a book on stroke recovery in the paper, well, that made a bunch of people come. So that's what worked for me. It wasn't my goal to do this, it just kind of happened.
That's great. Any other questions? Did you want to continue on? Did you have other slides or other info, or we can keep some Q&A?
Just a little bit. I was going to say one or two more things, not a big deal, just to close off with. But yeah, but I know one thing I'd like to share, I think this will help you guys understand things too. I run a stroke support group on Facebook. It's over, I think, 4,100 now people. But now I'm a small group. There's groups like many, many thousands of in there. And I asked them one time a few years ago, what is your biggest challenge or problem you face when you're going to find a fitness professional after your therapy ends? And most of them said, there's a lot of answers, but the main answer was they treat us so relevant and they don't know their muscles. So there's two stories. And if you heard me talk before, you heard me share these, but there's two stories that stuck with me. One man said he went to the gym and he got this trainer, and the trainer put him on the treadmill to warm up. Well, his arm didn't work very well. He didn't feel safe on the treadmill. He doesn't walk well at the time. And he had a stroke literally when he was on a treadmill. So he told this trainer, I have two reasons I'm fearful of it. And this trainer said, that's just excuses, do it anyway. Well, that made the stroke survivor quit. And he said, I'll never go to a trainer again. But then this other man on the other extreme end of it, he went to 10 different trainers until he found a trainer that would work with him. And this trainer was a paramedic on the side, or he's paramedic full-time trainer on the side. And he said, I know a lot about strokes, but I don't know how to fully train them. Let me find out some information. I'll get back to you. So he ended up training this gentleman. This is the 10th trainer he worked with, and they ended up bodybuilding together. He got a lot of recovery in that bodybuilding together. But there's two different personalities. There's a personality that give up instantly, and there's a personality that keep fighting for themselves. But if those personalities that give up really quick on themselves, their only experience if coming around professionals that don't have the education to help them, they're not going to realize it's because of the lack of education of the professional. They're going to think, oh, it's just a stroke, and they won't try. So that's why I get to my slide where I always say, towards the end, let me get there again, don't fake it. So if you don't have the knowledge to help the survivor, try to learn it, learn what you can. Tell them, I know this much, but I'm going to learn with you, or send them to someone else you know can work with them, or send them back to therapy. But don't pretend you know something, because you may cause them to give up on something, on themselves for recovery, and the limited knowledge can limit them. So if you fake it or you have limited knowledge, you may stop that person from ever driving again, ever walking again, ever working again, some major things in their life, and they'll never know it was lack of knowledge. They'll just think it was their stroke. So I'm all about knowledge is power, and it gives them power to have trust in you, which they need to have some power back in their life. And it gives you the power to help them. And it feels so great when I had this one survivor who's in my first book, The Stroke of an Artist. I knew his sister. We became good friends. So they're visiting. We're walking down the boardwalk downtown. And we stopped to look in the window, but he kept walking. And he was just walking by himself. And she got worried about him. Like, no, let him walk. So when he came back, I looked at him and said, I go, you felt freedom, didn't you? He goes, yeah. So he felt freedom taking off and walking without the women in his life, his sister, his sister's friend, his wife, and his trainer, who's a woman, always telling him what to do. He actually got to go off on his own and walk, and he needed that freedom back. They want their freedom back, and the knowledge that you gain can help them. And it's the fabulous thing. I mean, it's hard work, but when someone like my clients call and tell me, oh my God, I get to see my grandkids now. I never got to be alone with them for 2 years. I'm like, oh my God, that's so cool. Or they, like, I have a client I train in DC on Zoom. She started driving last week. I'm like, oh my God, that's so exciting. She hasn't drove in 4 years. So yeah, knowledge is power. Don't fake it. That's my biggest thing I like to get you guys to learn is learn your muscles. Learn how the fascia, like Joy was talking about fascia, learn how the fascia intertwines and works with the muscles. When I talk about that shoulder up in the air, that's also pulling the fascia up that affects the hips and wraps through the whole body. It all works together. And the more you learn about the fascia lines, where the muscles attach, you're going to be able to help these people so greatly. And they really need it. There's not enough professionals out there for them. I see it in these support groups. The questions they ask, they're desperate. They're desperate, but I don't mean like a judgmental, desperate way. They're desperate. They want their life back. And the only way they're going to get it if they have people helping them with knowledge. And physical therapy only covers so much, and it leaves them hanging. So that's my advice.
That's phenomenal. I think that's why I love this conference so much and the professionals that are part of this, because we're able, it's really about hitting home that message of the why. It's obviously important to understand the science and the craft, but with the end goal, like you said, is it's not simple, but it's as simple as, they want freedom. They want freedom to have their life back. And if we work back from there and give them that capability is so powerful, so powerful. So, and that don't fake it. I think that's a really powerful message to send home, because I think that unfortunately that is rampant, and it leads to a lot of distrust with our industry, understandably so. You can't blame consumers for lacking trust. So I think it's a good reminder. It's a great reminder.
I've had people come to me and they're like, well, I don't trust trainers. Why are you better? I'm like, oh my God, they're just instantly on defensive with them. You have to
right. Take the work to just work. You have to work extra hard just to get that sort of
trust, because it's already been burned.
Yeah, absolutely. What other, aside from, do you have your contact information up there or your books? Do you have any of that included? Right? But other resources or, obviously where they can reach you, your books and so on, but other resources that might be helpful?
So with my resources, I am tracymarkley.com. I have my books on Instagram. On Amazon. I have 4 stroke recovery series book. I have my stroke recovery course with the Function Aging Institute. And I have my YouTube. We have a lot of videos. I'll do videos free for my stroke survivors. I share them in the support groups. They watch them like, oh my God, I didn't know that. And then they start learning. Then they may buy a book. They may train me, or it just helps them, because a lot of them don't have money. Insurance doesn't cover much. So I have different ways out there to meet me. If you Google me, you'll find me. But I do videos on Instagram, and my sources are, right now it's my stuff, but I learned, what are my sources right now? I don't know what my sources are right now. I've had so much, I've already had my past sources, and they're all put here now.
Right. But, I think reaffirms, that experience is such an important teacher alongside the credentialed education and constant education and learning. Do you ever do that? Like, you look back at your career when you started and you're like, I can't even believe that I did that or said that or thought that or made my clients do that. And 10 years from now, we'll do the same thing. So it's a constant learning and journey, but aligning yourself with, people like you and your resources are powerful.
And I learned so much with my clients. So when they like for instance, when my 86-year-old man came to me in a wheelchair with his wife a couple years ago, his arm was literally blue. And I went, oh my God, I've never seen such. It kind of scared me. It looked like it was like a dead part of a body. And I've never seen anything like that. And the physical therapist in town sent him, this is another thing too, sent them to me because they're limited. They said, I can't help you anymore. And the arm therapist says, you'll never get your arm back. But this therapist says, but Tracy can work with you better. Because I have the freedom to do things where I'm not limited by all the rules of the
protocols and rules and right.
Yeah. And his arm, we started getting his arm moving. He was the one that reached for the dog. And so I learned when I have people come to me with different things I've never seen, then I learn about that.
Yeah.
And so you learn as you meet people at the same time. But when it comes to, like, for instance, I use the balance disc a lot and with certain clients. And years ago, the man that was in my first book, he started taking some of my classes too. He's trained private with it. Then he'd come do my Pilates classes and stuff. And one of the physical therapists would take my Saturday morning class with us. And so he came up, I'd bring the disc to class though. And Gary, my client, was always up in front with me so I can watch him, but the therapist in the class. So he came up to me at the front desk later and he said, all you talk about the neuro and the balance and the multiplication stuff, he goes, it all makes sense and I get it. He goes, I went back to look at my therapy books. It's not in our therapy books. So it's advanced work, and it's even advanced work for them. So like I was saying, the therapists don't reach out and get advanced. Right. They're only going to do the basic. And that's like, years ago I did hair. We learned the basics, but then you go take advanced color, advanced perms. Oh, we did perms back then. You always advance education in whatever work you're doing. Absolutely. To make you work with clients better, and it makes you stand out more. And the clients that really truly want to get together, they'll just know the difference. Like night and day.
They'll just know it, talk about it. Yeah, it'll come across without question.
Yeah, because they need to trust you.
Yeah, that's amazing.
They need to trust you.
If there's any, we are down to the last couple minutes here. If there's any last questions, come on by audio or type them in the chat. Otherwise, you've got Tracy's contact information. Tracy, you're always a wealth of knowledge.
I have another question.
Yeah, go ahead, Joy.
So what is the training of, at the FAI training like? I mean, how do you work with these clients in any other different way that you would work with any other, typical client? So it's two things. What is Tracy's training program like, and how do you work differently with a client?
Well, when it comes to, like, if you think of all the ways I talked about the muscle and the postural, I will make every client work on that no matter what. Because almost every client comes to me, well, right now there's so many seniors around me, fall prevention, balance, core. I will do the same philosophy with every client. Because basically, if you think you're trying to get someone to stand up or balance, how does a baby stand up and balance? It just stands up. Think of a baby developing. It's not, I got to do 100 squats, I got to be in the STEP program. It just keeps until the body and the neuro and the muscles train that ability. Then you move to the rotation. You go step by step. Like, you don't see the child all of a sudden rotating, walking down it has to stand. It has to get the stabilizing first. Then you can add the rotation. So I have the same philosophy with all my muscles and how they work, no matter which client, whatever client's coming with me with. And then it switches up if they're, if they have spasticity, or if it's somebody that hurt their leg or a back injury. It's just the same type of, does that make sense? Yes. I don't have a set, I don't call it like I'm something method, everything has to be this way. It's, like if I have a client, they need to strengthen their legs and glutes, but they have scoliosis. Like me, I don't like doing squats. Regular squats hurts my back. I have scoliosis. So I train that person for their glutes and hips differently than a person I may have do squats. but I program it to each person, whatever their niche, whatever they have going on, I adjust my little things around them. That's why if you know your muscles and movements well, it's easy to switch it up. Oh, you have wrist issues. Oh, you can't do tricep dips or push-ups. We're gonna do other things to hit those muscles you want to do. You know what I mean? You just kind of know how to tweak it up because you know what exercises work which muscles. That's how I work.
Yeah, that's great. Just get to the fundamentals.
Yeah.
Great question, Joy. Everybody was overwhelmingly, they've enjoyed this. Thank you everybody for joining. Thank you, Tracy, so much. Enjoy the rest of the conference. This will be recorded as well for access later, but Tracy, thank you. And thank you
Thank you
everybody
guys for having me. Hope you learned and it was helpful for everybody.
Absolutely. Thanks
Have a great
everyone. Have a great day.
Thank you.